One thing you can share with coaches, managers, knowing their teams are getting this time taken away from them. So, I don't know. I mean, that's really hard because I think a lot of people are like, oh, we got to grind and we got to make sure that we put in a ton of work, and they feel like they need to go out and put themselves in situations where they could be vulnerable. I think the most important thing during this time is obviously just to stay safe, number one, but I still think there's an opportunity to like do stuff if you can around your house or use whatever you have. I don't know. You want to take that one away?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty serious thing, this whole virus situation, but there's definitely things you can do on your property. You don't have to go in a big crowd to do some of this stuff. I mean, even just something small like mobility, a lot of baseball players, like rotational athletes, they have tight hips and like hamstrings, things like that. So, doing like mobility exercises, stretching, yoga, I earlier in my career I did a lot of stretching, a lot of static stretching, especially like post game. I think that it's kind of evolving. There's more information coming out now talking about doing things like FRC, which is like contracting your muscle, whatever muscle group you're working out, contracting it at full range of motion, basically trying to push your range of motion further as opposed to stretching it, like stretching my hip with my arm, pulling my leg up and stretching my hip. So that would just be like one small example of something you can do, just like in your house watching TV. You don't have to be super locked in. You don't have to be burning a ton of calories. Just like small things like that can really go a long way. And with how long the season is usually, you can change your perspective. I mean, for me, I've changed it to, instead of this season is going to be so short now, or it might not even happen. It's like this is an opportunity for me to work on things that I can't really work on during the season. When your body's breaking down and you're so beat up in a professional season, there's things that are just too far gone. Like, for example, if you have like a tweaked hip, those mobility things only go so far during season because you got a game every day. So this is like an opportunity almost for your body to have a little bit of like an active rest. Other things too, hitting is tough, especially, with the circumstances, but there's things you can do, hand-eye coordination stuff, throwing a tennis ball off the wall, catching short hops. I mean, you were doing that in one of your lessons today. So, just, I would say try and get creative. Mobility was the first thing that came to my mind. And yeah, hitting is tough for sure. I would say maybe if you can get to like an open area and there's nobody around, maybe you could hit some baseballs, maybe do some front toss or side toss with a partner. So.
Yeah, so like mobility wise for me, I'm really tightly wound. I'm a shorter guy, more compact, and right now I'm trying to work on my stride length. That's something that I really struggle with because I have really fast turning legs, but I'm not gaining much ground. So it actually comes down to my legs aren't able to stretch and cover that distance. So I have to basically help create that stretch by working on mobility so my body naturally does it. Because right now I can't produce that motion. So what I'll do kind of daily right now is kind of run through some things that Jacob has figured out with his training coaches, and these are all things that I can do just standing in my kitchen or like sitting on the couch or just whatever it may be, just running through some range of motion things with my hips, ankles, and making sure that when I do go outside and do some sprint work or whatever, I feel like I can kind of get a little bit more distance on each stride. So that's personally something that he's been helping me out with. And this is professional to professional, I really appreciate him doing that, and I can only imagine how helpful that is for a young kid trying to learn how to sprint the right way or like what type of techniques they need to improve on at that age. I wish that I had that. So, for example, right now, when I run, I'm very robotic. My hands are straight up and down like this, and it looks very tight instead of just loose. And what he's been helping me with is kind of getting into that better position where everything is flowing naturally and we're able to kind of spring each step rather than forcing each step to happen. So I'm sure that there's a lot of kids out there that kind of get advice like that too. They hear a lot of information from coaches that may not know what they're doing, and they feel like they were taught a certain way, so that they have to teach that next generation. I think that the beauty of baseball is constantly evolving. There's always new things that people are learning that makes people better. So yeah, what's the next question we have on there?
Which one do you want to do? Maybe this one?
Yeah, how often do you lift in season?
Yeah.
Okay.
How often do you lift in season? This is, for when baseball starts back up again, this is a frequent question that a lot of amateurs ask. And they're just not sure because there's so many games that are played in a professional season. And they want to know, I guess, what our habits are. You can go ahead and...
Yeah, so when I'm in season, I think this is now going to be my 4th professional season. Coming off of injury my first half season, I was lighter on my loads. But as I started to feel healthier each season, I was able to press a little bit more. But I would say that we probably do 3 days a week or 2 days a week, depending on how you feel. It's really just a feel thing in season because you want to make sure you're performing. You don't want to go into games completely sore and feel like you're just having to push through. You want to feel your best each day, but you also want to feel like you're progressing in your workouts. Would you agree with that as well?
Yeah, I think the off season is really the time where you make all your gains, strength, speed, explosiveness. During season, basically when you get to spring training, that's just the time to start maintaining, because you'll get hurt. There's so many games, and especially someone like you and I, like we have to run hard every single time. Not saying there are people who don't have to, but we have, I guess, a better chance to get an infield hit. If you hit like a swinging bunt and you sense that you might be able to get a hit, you'll kick it into that extra gear. And when you're lifting really heavy with so many games like that, it really takes a toll on your body. So I learned to manage that. Even in college, we lifted pretty hard. And I would say even in season, we lifted pretty hard from my experience. When I got to professional baseball, it was just one of those things I had to dial it back. But I made sure I got in the weight room and did some sort of weightlifting twice a week. And any type of mobility stuff on top of that was just a bonus. I like I said, I really don't push it too hard, go too heavy in season, and I don't know too many guys who can actually push it that hard in season and stay off the DL.
I think I would say this though, we do something every single day. It's not necessarily like putting 400 pounds on your back and squatting it or deadlifting 500 pounds. Mm-hmm. Like we definitely make sure that we're covering mobility work or flexibility or whatever it may be. Maybe not flexibility as much as mobility, but just making sure maybe our weighted ball routine, or if you're a pitcher or whatever it may be, whatever routine you have, we are following daily. And then on top of that, we probably have 2 to 3 days a week where we're either doing a total body lift, or maybe some people segment that into different things where they do upper lower. I personally like upper lower. Some organizations love just a total body lift to make sure that they cover all that. I personally like lifting heavy as long as I can, but everything's relative in lifting. So like, for some people, lifting 350 pounds on a squat would be like ridiculous, and some people that'd be really easy. So you just basically have to find like whatever your happy medium is and try to stay around that area, and maybe by the end of the season you've increased your max a little, maybe not max, but increased the weight that you've been able to handle, or maybe you're just slightly decreased. But as long as you're maintaining that same type of weight, I think that's a really solid thing throughout an entire season. So like he said, I think everything is really gained in the off season, and then you go into the season with what that is and try to maintain in that area.
For sure. The next one, how do you get out of a slump? Go ahead and answer that one.
How do you get out of a slump? I think that also comes down to like stuff that I work on in the off season, because I think about like what are the movements that I have to have in my swing, and then if I'm not doing those things in season, like what do I need to do to get back to that? So it's like constantly going back to, maybe it was a drill that I did in the off season that was making that movement happen. Maybe I go back to that drill in season. to make sure that I can find that again. But a lot of the times it's so mental. Like for me, sometimes I just get in the box, and I'm sure a lot of people have this. They just have like some type of doubt in their mind, like, I don't know if I'm going to get a hit right here. It's been so long that since I got a hit, I don't know if I can find it again. I think that's what a lot of us think. And sometimes it just takes one hard contact or like one good walk or one good at bat, and you feel like you're right back to where you need to be. So I think confidence is clearly the biggest thing, but also knowing the movements that you worked on in your off season and going back to those.
Yeah, I mean, there's no getting around it. No matter how good of a hitter you are, you're going to have a bad slump. You know, if you haven't had a really bad slump, you just haven't been playing long enough. So it's just one of those things you got to deal with it. Even if you're swinging the bat great, you feel like your swing is perfect, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a great at bat every single time. For me, I started keeping a journal. That helped a lot. You know, just climbing up the levels of the minor leagues, the pitching doesn't get any easier. And so sometimes you have to understand that no matter what, in certain at bats, if the pitcher executes their pitches, you really don't have much of a chance. So the best thing you can do is understand when the pitcher executed the at bat perfectly from his side, sequencing, pitch location, pitch selection. If he does all that and you write that down, you know, and like I said, sometimes there's not much you can do. So for me, keeping a journal was really big this past year. It helped me get out of a really big slump, one of the worst slumps I've ever been in. So that helped me just kind of look in the mirror and say, am I doing anything wrong? Because sometimes you might not be. And even when you're getting hit, sometimes you might be doing things wrong. That's on the other end of the spectrum. So
I'm going to cover this and then I can see somebody ask a question. So, as far as like when I'm in a slump, sometimes what I do is I just think about one thing in an at bat that I can accomplish, and that'll help me move on to like that next progression. So sometimes it's like, what is causing me to be in this slump right now? Maybe it's I'm super off balance with my weight. So this next at bat, no matter what happens, if I strike out, if I fly out to the pitcher, if I hit a weak ground ball, as long as I focus on my balance and making sure that that's consistent on every single pitch, whether I'm taking, whether I'm swinging as hard as I can, it doesn't matter. I need to be in that same position. Then I can move on and know that, okay, I figured that out. What's the next thing? Okay, well, maybe now I am getting way too long in my approach and my viewpoint of where I'm aiming to hit the ball is not where it needs to be. So now I'm going to sync that up as well. And then eventually you find yourself into the right positions for me, and I get out of that slump. So that's kind of what I think is like the smaller I can make it, those smaller objectives eventually lead to way better outcomes. But let's see what this guy says. He says, you have 30 minutes for hitting practice. What is your routine for that 30 minutes? That's interesting because we do that, you know, when we're able to go hit. I'm sure we're going to go back into our routines, but do you want to kind of run through what your routine is?
yeah, this actually ties into the slump question anyway. When I had a really bad slump almost for like 2 months, the first 2 months of last season, and my hitting coach, who I've had for basically since I signed, he ever asked me if I did one-handed bat stuff, just working with my top hand and bottom hand separately, and I said no, I hadn't. I didn't really like the feel of it. I like to kind of think of my whole body moving as one. And anyway, I was open to the idea because I was pretty much helpless. I felt helpless at the time, I guess. So I started doing some one-handed stuff, and my mechanics sort of cleaned themselves up in the game, and I ended up getting out of that slump. So for me, the first thing I do, no matter what, game or practice, is one-handed drills. I have like a small bat that I use, and I just work on my top hand, especially for me because I'm a right-handed thrower, lefty hitter. So my left hand is not quite as coordinated, and that's my top hand. And for you guys have probably heard this, but your top hand is so important when you're hitting. And you know, that's the first thing that I do. And if I do anything after that, it's probably like maybe some front toss or some really, really close overhand, just to kind of work on velocity and not having much reaction time trying to mimic the game. Those are like the most important things for me, the one-handed bat, and then I would say like the close overhand.
Yeah, so my in-season progression is a little bit different than out of season. I actually start hitting out of season probably around December time. I take a couple months off to just kind of let my body regenerate itself. And I usually start for about 2 to 3 weeks off of the tee, only hitting tee. And I'm just focusing on if I'm staying in the right positions. Like if I'm getting my scap loaded in the right way, am I separating my front leg from my back elbow? Am I feeling like I'm too long and dropping my bat, or am I getting to the spot directly? But a lot of the times, the main thing that I focus on is my balance, because I focus so much on my rhythm before pitch that it can cause me to jump towards the pitcher and move my head as well. So I'm constantly trying to separate my hand with my front leg while my head stays in position, and when it's time for me to fire, I focus on rotating without diving forward. So I do a lot of that work on the tee, and that usually starts off with slow moving parts. Like my first movement backwards in my toe tap is super slow. My first 5 swings of the day are really slow and controlled, focusing, driving back to the corners of the nets. And then eventually, as I finish those progressions, I go into some type of soft toss or front flip where I'm working on inside, outside pitches, driving it right center, left center. And it's really the same things there. I'm focusing on those movements that I was focusing on with the tee, but now everything's speeding up, so I have to be even slower with that load and make sure everything else is controlled as well. And then I start to get to close overhand throw and then machine as well. So it really depends on what you guys have as well. Like if you have machine, for me, that's one of my favorite things, because you can face so much velocity and spin and breaking balls, and you can simulate game situations, angles coming in, and it's just a lot better for me personally. Some people don't like that, but it helps me prepare for games. So when I get closer to the season, that's a huge thing I use. And I'd say in season, that's another big thing that I use as well before games, to make sure if I'm facing somebody that's throwing really hard, maybe I'll scoot up to the machine a little bit closer to make sure my reaction time's a little bit better. When I'm in season as well, I almost eliminate using the tee as much, because I find myself, sometimes I create a bit of like a, I don't know what the right word is for that.
Tilt?
Yeah, too much, almost too, like over rotation, like fake tilt. So it's not realistic unless I really like focus on if there's a pitcher there and make sure my separation is straight instead of being way too like this. So I almost eliminate tee most of the time in season and just go straight to flips, but I really do focus on those movements being simplified and short, so that when I get to that quicker pitch, I'm really prepared and ready to go on that.
The thing about the answer to this question, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just things that we've learned over the years about ourselves, about our swings, and it might change. I mean, I might have gone into this season and my routine might have changed because I liked how something else felt better than what I was doing before. So it's always changing, because your body's not the same. You're gonna wake up feeling different you're gonna wake up feeling different in August than you do in May. You're gonna be broken down, so you might have to change your routine. But it's just, that's our answer right now, but it might not be our answer in 4 months.
And there's no one size fit all too. Like there's so many coaches out there right now, especially when I was growing up. I don't know how it was for you. Like a lot of the coaches said everyone needs to do this one specific thing. Now, I really believe that there's certain positions that everyone needs to get in as far as hitting goes, but how you get to those spots can be so completely different. For example, I would watch my favorite hitters from the Atlanta Braves and from the Atlanta area, and I would try to like emulate their swings and their stances. And sometimes they'd say like, you can't do that stance or whatever, and that's not necessarily true as long as you're getting to those spots that you need to get to. And it's whatever works for you. Whatever helps you the best get to those positions is perfect.
Right. My boy Phil's on. Thumbs up to you, Phil. Just want to give you a shout out. Tilly0501, great info, guys. Love this.
Yeah, happy to be doing this. I'm gonna continue to keep doing this, especially with the quarantine and everything. I'm sure people are looking for information, so we're trying to give as accurate as information as we can. So
for sure.
Why don't we answer the high school, college, or pro one?
Okay, this would probably be the last question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, last question. Probably the most important question. The question is, what are the biggest changes you made from high school to college and college to pro? Go ahead.
You start that off.
Okay.
That's fine.
Biggest changes I made from high school to college, I would say off the field, the biggest change I made was like learning time management, because we had such a tight ship, with Coach Cohen at Mississippi State. in high school, it was, just kind of on my parents' schedule. I didn't have a car or anything, so I had to rely on them for rides. And I didn't even have a car or I didn't even have a car my freshman year of college. So I had to coordinate rides with people. But when I got to Mississippi State, I didn't quite realize how scheduled everything is. And, there's a specific time to be at a specific place every single day of the week. So that's something I really learned was time management. I think it helped me on the field just be more responsible, with my training and, how long I was training, the intent behind each drill I was doing, because I only had a certain amount of hours in the day. And I think, like I said, it ended up helping me on the field in turn. That would be high school to college. Do you want to answer that one or you want me to answer both?
I'll do mine and then you can go. So high school to college, I'll just kind of go through a hitting thing that I went through from high school to college. I had to make some big adjustments. So when I was in high school growing up, I went to like the East Cobb area for that type of like travel baseball, which is huge in the area. It was easy for me to get recruited and we played a ton of games. But because I was playing so many games every single day, I wasn't able to focus as much on my strength and conditioning training, my mobility training. I just didn't really focus on that at all. It wasn't some of my like key things that I had in my mind. It was more about like, how do I impress scouts? How do I get a hit today? That was really what I was focused on because we had double headers every single day in summer ball. So when I came into college, there was a huge learning curve as far as like making sure that I was getting my physical ability up to par with those other players because I was really competitive. I could play the game. I was a good player, but I was lacking some of that physicality that would take me to the next level. And ultimately, I was able to get some of that helped me get drafted. So that was a huge thing from high school to college. And I would recommend to you guys, if you don't have somebody that you can train with, you need to find somebody that can give you something that is, number one, accurate. Like there's a lot of false information out there that's not good. If you're going to a strength and conditioning coach that doesn't have any idea about overhead throwing sports, then they're not going to be writing you an accurate program. So for example, I go to Rapid Sports in Atlanta. It's awesome for me. We also have people on Proco Plus that provide strength and conditioning programs that are really good. And we've got Brett Cummins, who's amazing on there. We've got Matt Moseman, who I work with the Oakland A's organization. He's awesome. We've also got some new trainers coming in as well right now. And if you're looking for a program, that's a no-brainer for me. I wish I had that, but I would say that was a huge adjustment. But then as far as my swing goes, when I was in high school, I was super two-part swing type guy, if that makes sense. Now, I'll break that down even more for some of you guys that don't know what that means. For example, one of the main adjustments people would say is get your foot down early. And I'm sure you guys hear that a lot is, if you get your foot down early, you're going to be on time to your pitch. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you get your foot down too early, you're going to have to regenerate a two-part swing. As in your foot comes down and then you have to regenerate every other motion in your swing. And it's actually going to cause you to be later than what they want you to be. So I had to figure out a way to make my swing into a one-piece smooth action where I wasn't jumping at the ball, where I wasn't off balance. And that was the most difficult transition for me from high school to college as far as hitting goes. Defensively, I had to learn how to come get the ball a lot better. Sometimes I would sit back on the ball in the infield, and it was a lot easier because the runners weren't as fast in high school, so I could get away with a lot of stuff. But then all of a sudden, you start facing elite-level athletes with some serious speed and power, and there is no time for an extra step or a bobble in the infield. You had to make every single play as quickly as possible and as efficient as possible. So every piece of the game as you move forward takes a next step.
Yeah. Before we jump to the second part of this question, someone asked, what extra work did you do in high school to help you get recruited? You kind of answered that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just revert to the strength and conditioning thing. I just think, and mobility and everything like that. For me, that's a huge piece of this. Just because ultimately people are not looking for you if you don't have that physical ability. You'll just get overlooked. Even if you're like a solid player and you have a good-looking swing, I think that people will say, he's a great player, we just want to see more physicality out of him. And that's what they said to me. I mean, I was always a really solid player at a great average, but I could never get my extra base hits up because I didn't have that ability. I wasn't strong enough yet. And then once I started to develop into that, then I became a professional prospect and got drafted. So I think that's a no-brainer for you guys, just to be weary that, hey, I can improve on my mobility, always. I can improve on my strength, my hand-eye coordination, all those things you should be working on.
Yeah. So the biggest change from college to pro. Let me think about that one. Do you have an answer for that one?
Yes, I do. Do you want me to run into that first?
Yeah, I'll think of mine.
Okay, so when I was in college, like I said, I had to find a way to get into that, out of that 2-part swing that I had in high school to a, more balanced swing. And when I got to my junior year, I had a surgery on my knee, and I was finally able to be healthy. I got a ton of strength under me, like I said, finally, and I was a lot more physical than I'd ever been. I was faster than I'd ever been. I was a better defender. My arm was great. And I had the ability to be a professional prospect, but my hitting hadn't taken off yet until my junior year. So the one thing for me was I had to think about my contact point and my aggression, and that changed the angle and path of my swing. So I would get super choppy when I would think about, hey, hit a line drive to the second baseman, which is what I was taught to punch in high school and in early years in college. And then as I developed more, it was more, hey, can you drive the ball through the wall? And when I started setting my point deeper, or my contact point out front more, I was able to hit more extra base hits and use the abilities that I had got over those years to help me get drafted. So that was one thing for me as far as hitting goes. Fielding wise, I just continued to make sure that my arm was good. So I guess, what we did was we did some weighted ball programs that really helped me as I got into like my back half piece of college. And then when I went into pro ball, I think one of the hardest things is when you get to pro ball, there's so many games. So there's so many ups and downs as far as slumps, having average weeks, and then having amazing weeks. So what I would try to do is I would say, okay, how did I do every 100 at-bats? Because we have so many at-bats. How did I do every 100 at-bats? And if I had 30-something hits in my first 80 at-bats, I would say, okay, I know that I've accomplished my goal, but I need to now set it to the next level. So I would set goals for myself to make sure that I was achieving those things. What about you? What kind of things would you think about?
I think that I got away with a lot my whole career until professional baseball. I didn't really have to worry about getting a good jump. When I was stealing bases, I didn't really have to worry too much about trying to pick the pitcher's signs. If he's tipping his pitches, if he's digging in his glove when he's throwing an off-speed pitch. I didn't really look for those things because I'd always just had success, and I guess I didn't think about it because I hadn't really struggled to the point where I started to look for things like that. My biggest change I think I made from college to pro is just doing things that aren't necessarily hitting better or throwing better. It was more like really like the game within the game, just like really small, tedious things within the game that I just never really had to rely on.
For example, what?
So, picking up when I'm trying to steal second base, growing up, I had always been pretty quick and had success stealing bases, but I just kind of went when I saw the pitcher move his front foot to throw the ball to home plate, and that's just not enough, especially as you move up to the upper levels of the minor leagues. That is not going to really cut it. You need to see if the pitcher is changing his grip, if he's moving his shoulders first before he's throwing. Maybe you can, when you take a lead, peek in and look at the catcher's signs. If you see that he puts down an off-speed pitch, that gives you a better chance to steal the base because it's going to take longer for the pitcher to throw it, and it might be in the dirt. So things like that, I never even thought of because I had always just been a good base stealer because I was fast. Moving up in the minor leagues, it gets harder and harder to take that extra base, and understanding when to go and when not to go. Growing up, it was like I was always going because I was always just going to be safe. And now these guys, their arms are way better, and they throw very accurately, and they throw to the correct base. They usually throw it through the cutoff man, and they do in college too. It's just they don't really. The higher you go, the better the arms get. And
did you ever hunt pitches while you were in college compared to professional baseball?
I think
depending on counts.
When I was in college, I would always just try and hit the fastball. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and act like I have hitting figured out. I don't at all, but I didn't really know how to hit off-speed pitches in college, and I started to get a better feel for it in pro ball. These are just things from experience, just from seeing pitches, from seeing pitchers' tendencies, and, you know, you'd be surprised how much you pick up on, even if you're not facing the same guy. It's little things. And even when we were just at spring training, I caught myself, without even trying to, I caught myself picking the pitcher's signs when I was watching the game from the dugout. These are just things I would have never thought of doing. But in terms of your question, it's a lot easier to hit a pitch when you know it's coming. And, you know, you can talk about whatever happened with the Astros. You know, those guys hit so well, and I wasn't there. I wasn't on either team, so I can't really comment too much on it. But knowing when a pitch is coming makes it a lot easier to hit it.
Like, for example, when we hit off the machine, think about how much easier it is when you know a fastball is coming compared to when you set it on the breaking ball speed and you know the breaking ball is coming. When you mix those two up, it's so much more difficult because you have to make sure you're on time for the fastball, but able to detect if the hump comes and for the breaking ball and everything. That's what separates some of the best hitters, is when they can recognize when there's spin coming right down the middle, you know it's going to drop. Mm-hmm. Or if there's spin starting in the outside portion of the plate, they know they can take it. I think that's another huge thing that I've had to figure out. I struck out a ton on breaking balls in the dirt coming from a right-handed pitcher in the SEC, especially with a lot of good hard sliders. And that was something I had to learn, was every time I see the ball breaking middle, if it starts breaking middle, I know it's going to be a ball. Whereas before I was saying, wow, it looks so good because it's middle, I'm going to start my swing now and try to catch the ball and hit it over the fence or drive to the gap. And I was way too far out front of it because I couldn't recognize, if I saw that type of spin, it's going to be out of my zone. So I'm sure the same thing for you, right? With lefty breaking balls, like you have to recognize when you see that type of spin. And that comes with just over time learning what that's like, right? I mean, you're not going to be able to figure that out immediately, especially in high school, because think about, like, when you're in high school, you don't get to see the type of RPMs that we see now. And even machines can't necessarily recreate those RPMs. Mm-hmm. It's something that you have to see, you know, day in and day out as you progress each level. So I think just continuing to play at a high level will give you that experience.
Yeah, there's so much to come with just playing baseball games. You know, you can only do so much in the cage. You can only take so many ground balls. At the end of the day, you know, when you step between the lines and the umpire says play ball, that almost can all go out the window. So you have to, my advice would be to just play as many games as you can, and you'll start to do things. You know, I didn't necessarily have the intent on trying to see if the pitcher was tipping his pitches, but I naturally started to do it because, you know, I learned from guys who did it, and frankly, I've been at the point where it was like, I need to know what's coming, you know, in order to hit. So, you know, it's a tough game. I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy, but there are things you can do to really improve your game. So.
You also start to figure out too, like for me, if a runner's at this base in this situation, I basically know, even without having a scouting report, 99% of the time I know that this pitch is going to happen in my first pitch of my at-bat. Like if I have nobody on, nobody out, nobody on, 2 outs, and you know it's the first inning, I'm probably going to get a fastball because the guy wants to get out of the inning as quickly as possible. So what I should be thinking is, I'm going to try to hit an extra base hit on this first pitch fastball. Like those are things that I didn't think about until I started getting to the next levels, and that helped me be able to increase my extra base hits, because then I could say, okay, I know this is coming right now. Now I'm going to get my bat head to this point and destroy the ball. So like those, I think just taking the game to those next levels just helps everyone out. And the quicker that you can learn those things, the higher value you're going to have for yourself, and hopefully somebody else sees that and gives you a college scholarship, or a professional scout sees that, and they will absolutely see that. They'll recognize that quickly. Let's see, are we talking forward ball spin? What does that necessarily mean, Tilly? Could you write something there? Let's see what else we have here too. Thanks for speaking with us today. This is Josh. Josh, yeah, thank you for being on this, man. We're happy to help anyone we can right now. I know obviously this is a weird time, but we thought we'd do our best to give some information for you guys, and hopefully this helps it any way possible. On a breaking ball. So are we talking forward spin on a breaking ball?
I think she means when you're saying, oh, when you see spin, and it's down the middle, it's going to be a ball.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that would be forward. That would be like top spin on a curveball or a slider. Would
Right.
Be sort of
right.
side spin.
Another thing too is an adjustment that I made in college. I'm going to add on to this. Was that because I was doing that 2-part swing, I felt like I had to jump towards the ball to catch it, where that was actually making me slower, and I wasn't actually able to see the spin as well. And now what I work on when I get back into the cage, hopefully here soon, is I make sure that I sit in the same exact spot that I start. I just have a stretch, but my center of mass stays in that same spot. And when it's time to snap that stretch and I recognize that ball's in the right position, I make that transfer, if that makes sense. Instead of making my weight shift go forward towards the pitcher and I lose all of that. And then my eyes are moving too and I can't see that spin and I start swinging breaking balls in the dirt. So how important is hitting off a tee as a part of a typical routine? I think go ahead and answer that one.
I would say that's a personal preference. Some guys love hitting off the tee. I don't love hitting off the tee because you can kind of still get away with doing things and hit the ball well. You can get away with maybe some bad habits and still hit the ball well off the tee, so it may give you a false sense of accomplishment. For me, I like the ball moving because ultimately that's what you're going to get in the game is a pitch. Someone's throwing the ball to you. So.
Yeah, and like I said before about when I would get too rotational, you just got to make sure your movements are crisp and right and you're doing the right things when you're off the tee, and I think it's beneficial, especially starting out the season or your off season, just getting your swing back in track. Let's see, how can a person use a tee to improve hitting?
There's one above that.
Okay.
Infield drills.
Any infield drills you think could be helpful for kids they can do inside their house? Yeah, so that's actually good. So today with a client that's working with me, they're kind of going through the same thing where they're like, hey, we want to make sure that we're working on something infield-wise because we're unable to get to the field. For me, handwork is a huge thing that I work on. Actually, when I was at spring training for a little bit, one of the things that I was working on is I personally get super swipey with my hand. So I have to constantly keep my head and hand glued and work through baseballs. So when you work through a ground ball, you stay on track, just same way as you hit, right? Like when you stay on a pitch, you stay on track and you hit the ball harder. You are more accurate with your glove when you're able to stay through and on track with that baseball's trajectory coming in. So one thing I do is sometimes I'll just do knee drills where you're on your knees or if you have a carpet with you, and I'll have a parent just hops, and eventually the one hops get harder and we start doing 2 hops and mixing up hops. But on each one of those things, we're making sure we're working through the ball, and then we'll move angles and make sure we're doing forehands. And the same thing, a lot of people will want to turn. We have to make sure that we stay glued, and then with a backhand as well, everything stays glued and through. Now, when I was in college, one of my difficulties that I had was a backhand because I would come backwards with it and then try to make the throw from there rather than getting the right angle to the ball and making sure my feet were moving through so that I could get that forward motion with my hand so I could catch it perfectly and have an easy throw right there. So I think that to shorten this up for you, here's your answer. I think that you could use a brick wall. You could have a parent toss you a tennis ball or any type of ball. What I used to use as well is a Z ball, and that had different directions the ball would go, and we'd drop it and it would bounce in a certain direction. We'd have to catch it with one hand. Or we'd be balancing on some type of Boju ball or some type of balancing mechanism, and we would say left hand, boom, and you'd have to catch with your left hand. There's just certain drills, and you can make it fun too. I think kids love competitive things. So when you say hey, you do this, if you get 10 of these or 7 out of 10 of these, you're going to get a Kit Kat bar. If you do 7 out of 10 of these, you're going to get this. For me, I loved Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So I was a huge Yu-Gi-Oh nerd, and I'm sure he'll make fun of me for this. But I had the entire Yu-Gi-Oh like arm thing, and you could slide a Yu-Gi-Oh card in and like battle against friends. So I would suggest you guys checking that out, and I'm sure there's some kids out there that are now gonna go buy that. So,
Okay, moving on. Sent you a question a little earlier, Jal Kala Jr. Can you resend that? We didn't see it.
I'm gonna scroll. Let's see. Send me a question a little bit earlier. Any Oregon folks? No Oregon folks.
I think that person meant, are there any people on Proco from Oregon?
Oh, I don't know if we have any Oregon players.
I don't know if there are, but the good part about Proco is it doesn't really matter where the players
Exactly. Yeah. The best part about this is we can give you like one-on-one analysis with your swing or your infielding work, and we can kind of give you a drill specific for what you need to work on. And that's kind of why I created this, because I knew that a lot of coaches, like I said earlier, were giving just one size fit all cookie cutter type of things. And I also see a lot of things now where it's like, hey, sign up with my program, $5.99, and you get all these stock videos. Or, hey, I just watched this video on YouTube, and those are great. But like I said, baseball is so different where each person can have a different stance or movement or way of things they do it, but we have to get you to those specific positions some way. And I think that's where we can come and help.
There's a couple more, I think.
Okay.
Scroll down.
Any ideas on increasing bat speed to gain exit velocity?
There's more above it.
Okay, we'll do that one after this.
Okay, Noah Vaughn.
What is Proco, and is it recommended during this time of quarantine? Yeah, I mean, like, that kind of goes along with what we were saying, right? Like, I think that a lot of people right now are thinking, well, I can't do anything, and we're here to give you the option that, yes, we can show you things that we're doing daily that are different from your, local coach telling you what to do. Maybe he's telling you to do 15 sit-ups per day and 20 push-ups, where we're going to give you something that's, a little bit different, that's actually going to probably progress you a little bit more, in my opinion. Do you want to kind of take that away with some of the things that you would probably do? Or like if somebody signed up with you, what would you get? Or what would you give them?
I mean, I'd like to think I can offer quite a bit of stuff. I grew up in a place that's not a baseball area, prototypically, so I kind of had to get my name out there and play more baseball than the kids around me. So I had to play for multiple teams, try and get my name out there, go to multiple tournaments in different places that are, not close to home. So that would be one thing that I could talk about, sort of my journey in getting recruited by colleges and things like that. Another thing too, I have running background. I would definitely be able to offer some insight on running mechanics, base stealing, things like that. Another thing too would be bunting, like bunt for a base hit. I don't know how many guys will be talking about that in their lessons, but things like that. Just speed guy type stuff.
I will say this for him, like, I am asking him questions daily of how I can improve my speed, because he's one of the fastest players that I've ever played with. So I'm constantly trying to learn how to be more mobile, how to make my strides the right distance, like I talked about in the beginning of this. But he's just also got an interesting approach too, because he's a lefty hitter that does really well against lefty pitching. And that's really rare. So I think a lot of kids, when they first start seeing lefty on lefty matchup, because it's a rare thing at a young age, there's not that many lefty pitchers, to be able to have somebody that has the experience and the success in that area and knowing kind of like the mindsets to have, I think that's a really great thing. So, I mean, I know that if I were somebody looking for speed growing up, that you would probably be one of the guys that I would be looking for, as well as that left on left matchup or outfield drills, or or if they wanted to talk about how to get to the next level coming from a small area, because you did come from a different place, whereas I was in the Atlanta area. It was a hotbed for recruiting, and I played on a team that was easy for me to get recruited. So, yeah.
Someone asked what positions. I'm an outfielder. I'd like to think center field's my main position, but I can play all three outfield spots. I played center field in college, so.
Yeah, so I play shortstop and second base. I played shortstop at Mississippi State, and then now I play second base primarily in minor leagues with a little bit shortstop mixed in and third base. But what I'd say about that is the more versatile that you can be as a player, the more value you have by far. So if you're a good hitter but you can't field your position, there's really only two places or one spot that you can be is really like a DH, or if you can somewhat stick them in one spot, maybe first base or
maybe left field.
Maybe, right? So you just give yourself so many more options when you're able to say, yeah, I can move from second base to left field or right field or center field if you need me, or I can go to catcher if you need me. That people start really taking more looks at you because they realize the value. If somebody gets hurt, if your bat starts to get hot, they can stick you in these positions. So yeah, I mean, I recommend, for me, when I was getting drafted, one of the big things was like, can you play multiple positions other than shortstop as well? And I think that's what allowed me to kind of get picked. Was yeah, they knew that I was athletic enough to move to third base if I needed, or if I needed to move to second base, that was another thing. Or if I needed to move to left, they can put me there in a pinch, or right, or whatever it may be. So yeah.
Someone asked about bat speed. Can you scroll up a little bit?
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
Any ideas for increasing bat speed? I'm gonna get the charger real quick so this doesn't.
Any ideas for increasing bat speed to gain exit velocity? For me, it's like if I have the proper mechanics and everything's smooth in my swing, then that's when I have the best exit velocity. It's not necessarily about like how quick and violent you can be. Of course, you want to have somewhat of a violent swing, but more than anything, it's about control, because at the end of the day, you can put up a really great number for exit velocity off a tee or flips, but can you hit a really sharp slider? Can you hit a fastball up and in? So for me, it's more about sorry, just putting the charger in there. For me, it's more about being smooth and controlled in my mechanics than it is about lighting up the exit velocity radar gun or Rhapsode or whatever you have. So that would be what I would say to that. There's another. Someone said JUCO pitch go up.
I'll go talk a little bit about the exit velocity as well, and then we'll move on to that. So, exit velocity wise, I would say that there's two things that you can do. Obviously, number one is you can make sure that you're working on strength and conditioning to increase the way you can efficiently move your bat. The second thing is making sure that your mechanics are on point and sound and moving in one flowy motion through the baseball so that you're able to stay on the ball a lot longer and create more impact on the ball. And what I mean by that is a lot of people growing up in high school, they're in and out of the zone so quick, so they can only hit one type of pitch or they can only catch a piece of the ball. But when you're catching a lot of the ball, you're putting more impact on the ball and thus having higher exit velocity. So I think extension is a huge piece that people need to focus a lot on, is how long am I keeping that barrel in the zone, and I'm not focused on really getting it out of the zone at all. I'm trying to drive the ball all the way through as long as I can before getting out.
Someone said, go up.
Let's see.
You scroll past it. Someone said their son's a JUCO.
Yes,
pitcher.
my son is a JUCO pitcher. What do you recommend for exposure to four-year schools? Field level app, bullpen, or live game videos, TrackMan, Blast Motion, or other tracking programs? It's interesting. You want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I can just touch on it. I think that, junior college, those guys are probably getting recruited by other schools, right? Because that's schools go to JUCOs to recruit kids, not just from high school. Four-year schools will come. If someone's putting up really good numbers, or they're throwing really hard, for example, some scouts will show up to that. I think that it's less about the effort you have to put. How do I say this? It's less about like the physical effort you have to put in off the field. Like it's less about the videos and like getting yourself out there.
Yeah.
It's more about just really playing well.
Yeah.
And if you play well, the scouts will find you. That's ultimately what I want to say. You can do as much blast motion, TrackMan as you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a great ERA, for example, then it's going to be tough to be scouted.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of people these days are looking like, well, how do I create the best highlight video or whatever to send to a college? Well, ultimately, like, these coaches are going to look at it and probably be like, what am I looking at? Like, I'm looking at a kid hitting the cage, or I'm looking at one swing, where we want to see in baseball consistency over a long period of time.
In a game.
In a game against good competition as well. So I think the best thing that you can do is just continue to make sure that you're working on your physicality and your health in this situation right now, so that when you get back out there, you're standing out amongst everyone else that you're playing against, so that you can get seen, and then they can say, hey, we need to give this guy a scholarship, or we need to pick this guy up in the draft. So yeah.
If I sign up for Proco, can send you videos of my son swing and have you work with us on suggestions for improvement.
Yeah, so Josh, that's exactly what we do. I mean, what you basically do is through Proco, you create an account, and I try to make this as accessible as possible. You basically can look at any position that we have on there. You can look through profiles. You can see whether somebody's an outfielder, infielder, left-handed hitter, college they went to, maybe they're a high school pick, what team they play for. And then you can decide whether or not that person's compatible. And I'm always happy, too, if anyone wants to DM me or send me a message and say, like, my kid is an infielder, this position, he's 12 years old, what should I be doing? Who should I set him up with? I can always find the right person to set them up with. But basically, yeah, you'd be able to send videos, you'd be able to send text messages throughout the entire month, get one-on-one direct access with the person that you're working with, and it's just constantly... What I like about it is it's creating a relationship rather than just like a one-time, here you go, I'll never see you again. We're trying to create relationships because ultimately that's what baseball is. I mean, college coaches want to get relationships with the players that they're recruiting. So they want to know if you're a good person. They want to know what type of family you come from. They want to know if they can rely on you in tough situations with a man on third base and 2 outs and your team needs to win. They want to know what type of personality you have as well. And I think that's kind of why we wanted to create these relationships as well. We want people to trust us and have that type of feeling, so it's not a one and done type feel, and you guys can kind of pick our brains about recruiting. You guys can pick our brains about professional baseball or whatever mental approach. You know, I know you do a lot of stuff with yoga and stretching, but everyone has their certain specialty, and I think that's the beauty of it. So you can kind of find who you're looking for and make that decision.
I think that might be it.
Okay, yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. You know, if you guys have any other questions, I'm always happy to answer anything you guys have, and I'm hoping that we can be able to do this again sometime, but just let me know if I can help you guys in any way. Take care.
Thanks, guys.